Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost podcast. Have you ever wondered what it would take for you to go from the pit of poverty to the pinnacle of prosperity? Have you ever wondered what it would take to climb from the deepest point of the pit of pain to the highest point in the pinnacle of prosperity, profit, and potential? Well, in today's conversation, I brought someone who has walked through this journey and who had mastered the art of communicating his experiences walking through that journey and turning that pain to prosperity. His name is Tiran Jackson. I'm going to bring him up stage to introduce himself and tell us a bit about his work and himself. But I want you to fasten your seatbelts as we get right into this conversation, because you're not going to remain the same again. The transformation that's going to take place after this conversation, you have no clue what it's going to do to you. So, we're going to bring Tiran Jackson on, and we're going to get right into it. Hi, Tiran. How you doing?
Hey, Daffy. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself as we get this show started?
Yes. Just a little bit about myself. I am a professional speaker. I am a certified life coach, and I'm an author. And I help people who are really going through some level of trauma, tragedy, or going through some transition in life learn to make the transformations that they need to be triumphant again. I do this because I am my first client. I had to go through a tremendous transformation in order to be able to regain control of life again. And I'm someone who I speak for organizations, corporations, companies in the education space, really about the power of resilience and what it means to be able to use what you go through in order to create positive growth in your life and in the life of those around you.
Wow, that was quite the introduction. And so I want you to begin to walk us through your experience and your story that, gets people taking up the monies in their wallet and, wanting to work with you or wanting you to work with them. Can you tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so I'll go back a good little ways. I went to college to become an engineer. I was always good in math and science, and I thought that was what I wanted to do. Went to undergrad, got a mechanical engineering degree. And while I was in college, I met this young lady named Malika, who started out as my girlfriend, became my fiance, and became my wife. We ended up moving from Tennessee to Indiana. And I started out as a aerospace engineer for Rolls-Royce and did that for the first part of my career, working on gas turbine engines and helicopters and a lot of different components as far as as what I did for myself. I identified myself as being a very, strong technical, design-oriented individual, and it was doing me well. After a couple of years, Malika and I, we decided we wanted to move closer to family. So we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And while we were here, I continued to work in different capacities as an engineer or as an engineering manager. And I thought that my purpose in life was to be an engineer, provide for my family, and that was what I was going to do for the remainder of my life. Fast forward quite a bit. Malika and I, we went through different changes throughout our marriage, and in the midst of it, she went through different careers, and we were at this place several years ago where we were getting ready to celebrate a momentous occasion. We're getting ready to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary. We had a great life. We had our son, Cameron. He was 12 years old at the time. And we were actually getting ready to celebrate by doing something that people do all the time. We were going to go on vacation, and we decided we would take a 5-day trip to the Bahamas, where we would get to spend a couple of days in paradise as we were reconnecting. Because at that point in time, Malika had just gotten promoted to a director level for this Fortune 500 company as an HR director. And we were celebrating that. But we knew we were both very busy, and we were really, really excited to spend this time together. So the day before we were going on this trip, I dropped my son off at his aunt and uncle's house and told him, "Don't worry, Cameron, we'll be back in 1 week to pick you up." And he
Wow.
was cool. He was fine. He was like, okay, I get time away from mom and dad, get to terrorize their dog, get to beat up his cousins, do all these different things kids do when they don't have to worry about their parents being around. They were going to spoil them. So he was in good. He was good, and he thought that everything was going to be fine. This isn't the first time mom and dad went on a trip before like this. So he was
Wow.
thinking that he was going to have a break for a couple of days from us. And like I said, we were getting ready to have the time of our lives. So the next day, Malika and I, we catch a flight to the Bahamas, get to the all-inclusive resort that we were staying at. And the first 2 days were great. First two great days were wonderful. We had time at the beach, fruity drinks, time at the pool. And on the third day, we thought we would actually leave our resort and be a little adventurous. We'd go on an excursion and tour and get to see different parts of the island, get to try some different food from different places. And they had this attraction where you could actually go swimming with these wild feral pigs. And Malika was really excited about doing that. And so
Wow.
we left the resort that next morning, took a bus to the marina. And as we got there, we started thinking about the rest of our time while we were still on vacation, what else we wanted to do. And we had a decision to make. And the decision was between if we wanted to spend a half day on this excursion just to tour the island. And then they had an option for a full day tour, an 8-hour tour. And as Malika and I were trying to decide what else we wanted to do, we decided that we would just do the half day tour because I wanted to go back and play golf at the resort that afternoon. And she thought, okay, well, she could go to the spa and we could still continue to fit things in our day as opposed to if we would have spent the full day out touring the island. So we made the decision to get on this half day tour, and we boarded with 8 other passengers thinking that this was going to be a great opportunity to just relax, enjoy, and take in everything that comes with being apart on vacation. Everything was great. The weather was perfect. We could smell the salt, the aroma of the sea. Everything was beautiful. And I sat there with my arm around Malika thinking that this was going to be the most memorable part of our trip, that it was going to be the greatest adventure that we would have. Little did I know that it was going to be the most memorable part, but not for the reasons one would expect. We took off at 9 o'clock in the morning on this excursion, and at 9:08, my life changed forever. At 9:08, I found myself waking up face down on the surface of a burning boat. Unbeknownst to us, we were sitting right above the boat's fuel tank. And there was a small spark that was coming, or a leak that was coming from the fuel line that was leading from the fuel tank to the outboard engine. And something created a spark, and that led to an explosion.
Damn.
So as I was starting to come to, I woke up because I was literally on fire. My right leg was burning as a result of what happened with the explosion. While I woke up on the boat, Malika was thrown out into the ocean, into the sea. And as I was starting to come to, I could see that second boat that I mentioned earlier where they were doing the full day tour. We hadn't left from the marina for too long, so we were still relatively close. And I heard the passengers on that boat looking at me and yelling, "Get off the boat, get off the boat." And as I'm starting to try to figure out what's going on, I can glance down and I could see my ankle bone on my left foot gushing out. As I said, my right thigh was burning from flames from the explosion. I tried to push myself up, but I crumbled. I tried to push myself up again. I didn't know it at the time, but I had my collarbone was broken in 4 places, which is why I couldn't push myself up. In addition to that, I had a broken right foot, fractured pelvis, a fractured vertebrae, bruised ribs, and all of these other injuries in that moment. And as I'm there, I am literally cooking. I am on fire.
Damn.
The only thing that I could do was reach my right hand out, put my fingertips in the ridges on the surface of that boat, and drag myself away from the flames. as I'm still in shock and trying to figure out what's going on. Drag myself about 5 or 6 feet until I pass out again. And when I come to, passengers from that second boat, they had swam over and pulled me off of the boat. And I'm grateful that they did, because about 3 minutes after they pulled me off, the second fuel tank on the boat exploded. So what was supposed to be a celebratory, momentous time has all of a sudden become tragic because of a freak incident that was unexpected, unplanned. My life suddenly changed in an instant. And just to fast forward some, Malika, she was horribly injured, and she survived till there was help to pick her up. And when they finally got her and one other passenger to shore, they took them to this clinic. I ended up being put on the back of a pickup truck on a piece of plywood, riding to this same clinic, broken. Physically, my left foot is dangling. And as they get me there, they put me on a stretcher and they start to wheel me in. And that's the first time I hear Malika's voice again since we got on the boat. And I hear her moans, I hear her yells, her screams. She's suffering in agony. I can't do anything about it. They wheel me into this bay. And after what seemed like an eternity, the one doctor that was there, he finally came over to me. And I asked him, how is my wife? How is Malika doing? And the doctor tells me that they're sending me and this one other passenger to the good hospital, and that Malika will be coming later. So as they're prepping me to get put on an airplane and flown to the main island where the good hospital is, I'm thinking to myself, Malika must not be injured too badly if they're sending her later. And so I don't hear her anymore, but I don't know what's going on, but I'm just assuming that she's going to be okay. And I get the opportunity to see the love of my life later that evening. They get me to the hospital. As they get me there, I start asking questions about my wife. Is she on her way here yet? They tell me they have to put me in emergency surgery. And as they put me in emergency surgery, they try to reattach what's left of my foot to my leg. I wake up in ICU. It's about 6 hours after the time of the incident now. And as I wake up, there's a nurse in the room with me. And as she sees me starting to come to, she goes and gets the doctors. And as soon as the doctors come in, I ask them, where is my wife? Is Malika here yet? The doctors, they look at each other in confusion and they step out the room. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the most obvious question that I could be asking them in that moment. She has to be here by now. After what was about 5 minutes, the two doctors came back in and they say, Mr. Jackson, we hate to inform you, but your wife didn't make it. Now, I'm thinking that she didn't make it. She just didn't make it to the hospital yet, but she's on her way. And, they had to break the news to me that Malika passed away at that clinic.
Wow.
Before they ever put me on the plane to fly me there. That they didn't want to tell me that news before me having to go through surgery and so on. And so on what was supposed to be, like I said, a celebratory, momentous occasion for Malika and I, it turned tragic. I cried myself to sleep that night, and I was still in disbelief. And as I went to sleep, I'm thinking to myself, this just has to be a nightmare. And I'm going to wake up and everything is going to be better. And I realized that this isn't my reality. I wake up the next day and I find that everything that I feared is true. That Malika is no longer here. I'm broken physically in this hospital bed. And I had to do something that I didn't want to do, but I knew I had to do. The 12-year-old boy that I dropped off with his aunt and uncle, I had to pick up the phone and I had to call him and tell him, son, mom and dad have been in an accident. I'm never coming home again. And I have to hear his voice on the other end of the line, try to process what was going on. It was one of the most painful things I had to endure. And I had to try to reassure him that I was going to be okay, even though at that point, I did not know I was going to be all right. Now, as the day kept going by, I told him I would talk to him later and that we would work through this and that I was going to be able to make it back home and we will figure this out. That afternoon, things got worse for me. As I'm laying in the hospital bed, I mentioned that what they tried to do during surgery was reattach what was left of my left foot to my leg. Well, my foot had gotten infected, and that infection started going through my body, and it was causing my organs to shut down. And as I'm laying in the hospital bed, I could see the EKG monitor over me, and I saw my vital signs go from green to yellow to red in a matter of about 3 hours.
No.
And at that point, I was ready to give up. I was truly ready to quit, and I was coming to grips with the fact that my wife had been taken away from me. I've had to break my son's heart, and now I'm about to be taken as well.
Oh no.
I'm truly, in truest state of despair that you can imagine. And at that point in time, they stopped bringing the doctors in to treat my infection and just started bringing priests in to pray over me because they assumed that I was about to pass as well. So I went to sleep thinking that I was never going to wake up again. And as time was going by, like I said, I had come to grips with the fact that all of a sudden, in an instant, my life had changed and now it's about to be taken. And that I wouldn't wake up to see that next day. Now, by the grace of God, I did wake up that next day. And a lot of things were happening that I had no control of that were working in my favor. This had made international news. And a level 1 trauma center in the U.S. saw what happened, and they said that they wanted to try to give me a chance to live because they figured that there was nothing to be done that could treat where I was facing in the Bahamas then. So they basically, a lot of things that happened to try to get me out of that hospital. And before I knew it, I was basically getting confiscated from the hospital in the Bahamas, put on an airplane and flown to Florida where they wanted to try to see if they could save my life. They get me there that afternoon and they tell my family, my mom and my sister, they had made it down there at that point. They said that we've got to do whatever we can to try to save him. If he spent another 2 days in the Bahamas, he definitely would have died. One more day, he probably would have died. They ended up having to amputate my left leg below the knee in order to stop the infection from spreading any further in my body. And over the midst of the next 5 days, I go through 9 different surgeries to put parts of me back together again. But after I went through 5 surgeries in one day, there was a moment where, and I'm a spiritual person, God spoke to me and he said something very clear to me. He said that I had a conscious choice to make and I needed to choose to be resilient if I wanted not just to survive, but to thrive. That my normal that I knew was not the same as what my new normal was going to be. And he said that resilience was not going to be about regaining what was lost, but it's about reshaping what still remains. And it's what I do with what still remains is going to dictate the narrative of my life from that point moving forward. So while I'm broken in this hospital bed, that's when it hits me that I'm going to have to understand the true power of resilience if I'm going to get through this. And that started the change in my mindset. It didn't change it right then completely, then and there, but that was the beginning of the transformation of who Tiran Jackson was to who I am today. And so from there, I went through a tremendous recovery, but I'll stop there. I'm sure you probably had some questions, Dafi, but that was when I knew that I was going to have to find that strength within to be able to deal with what was to come.
Wow. That was such a graphic illustration of your experience, and I really, really empathize with what you had to go through. And I also want to appreciate the fact that you found the courage, you found the grit, you found the resilience to pick yourself back up and be where you are today. So thank you so much for all that you have gone through on our behalf and for taking the courage and the strength to tell that story, as painful as it may sound. Now, while we go back into the conversation, I would like to ask, how did you deal with that trauma and turn that into a treasure? How did you deal with that grief and turn that into greatness? how did you deal with that pain and turn that into prosperity? And how can someone listening to us right now who is right in the pitfall of pain rise from that place to the pinnacle
Right.
of prosperity?
So, in the midst of my recovery, while I was going through different things, there were some steps along my recovery that were very helpful in positioning me in a place where I could actually look at the positive aspects of life still, even after losing so much. And there were certain elements that did help me. And I break all that down. I've got what I call a roadmap to resilience, which that roadmap stands for the key parts of restoration, for being able to understand that sometimes you have to rest and recover physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to be able to be a better version of yourself and move forward. Part of it goes into the whole obsession. I had to focus with a laser-like focus on what the most important thing was. For me, part of that time was doing the physical therapy to be able to get me back to a point where I could walk again with a prosthetic. Part of it was focusing on going through the right grief counseling and dealing with my emotions and understanding that I had to do a lot of shadow work to figure out who I was, being authentic at that point in time to understand how I was going to be able to move forward. Because the version of me who I was before was not going to be the version of me moving forward with the rest of my life. Part of it was getting to this place of acceptance, understanding that I had to come to grips with the fact that I was going to have to move forward, looking different, being different, and without the person who I love most in this world. And acceptance of that reality and not being in denial. Denial is the enemy of acceptance, and it's hard for us to move forward if we're stuck holding on to everything from our past. I had to get through, I had to make certain decisions. I had to have the right motivation to keep me going when I didn't want to keep going, the right attitude, and understand that there's a process to everything that we need to do. That everywhere we got in life, our mind got there first. And having to be able to visualize where that outcome, where that goal is, understand that there's strategy in the process of getting to where you want to get to, that there are certain tactical actions to get there. Now, as I mentioned, my background was in engineering, so I thought very process oriented to begin with. And once I was able to go through this emotional healing process, first off, it was an emotional discovery, because I had to dive deep into emotions and feelings that I'd never had before or never understood how to leverage and use those. But being broken actually created an opportunity for a better version of me to be healed and be created. And so with that, I learned a new level of empathy towards others. I learned a new level of learning how to ask for help and support as opposed to being so self-reliant. And actually learning to discover new areas of interest that I never would have thought of before, because I was so focused on being in engineering and doing that because it was something that I was good at. But I realized that I was going to need to figure out who I was at that stage in life and what I was drawn to and what led to what provided the greatest ambition for me. So all of those factors definitely played a role in getting past the grief, getting past the pain. And grief is something, it isn't anything that you ever truly get past completely. But I had to learn the emotional control piece, the emotional awareness aspect of what I was dealing with and how to be able to channel my energy. Because, when you're going through this place of the emotional roller coaster, you can be in a place where when something triggers you, it can take you, put you on 10. And what I realized was there are certain strategies that you become more resilient, that when you have those triggers, it brings that 10 down to an 8 and then down to a 6, and you learn to manage yourself better. And as I learned to manage myself, it wasn't as if I was avoiding the spikes of grief and pain and hurt, but it was being able to not let those distract me from the healing and the recovery and completely set me back from where I was in the beginning. I understand that with some people, with grief, they constantly go back to square one again when it hits them. And so learning how to not let it take me back there was a key aspect of me being able to still make progress, even though it might not be as quickly as we might expect or want it to be, but still making that progress every day. And in doing so, what I learned was that that I was going to have to do different things. And, you know, speaking was something that I never really thought would be something I'd ever do. Part of my recovery, I was literally where the only limb I could use was my right arm and my right hand. My left arm was in the shoulder, my right foot was in a cast, my left leg was missing. And while I was in this phase, one of the things that helped me out the most was I started journaling and writing about past memories, about things that Malika and I had done, and just about some of what had happened in my life, and also trying to figure out what does it take for me to get my life back together. So looking ahead. And in the midst of it, I didn't understand it at the time, but that became my first book, Choosing Resilience. And once I had that book, and I was actually asked to, at one point in time, to speak to a group in regards to having to overcome adversity that I didn't see happening in my life. It led to me getting the opportunity to speak, and it turned into another opportunity. And before I knew it, I was developing a business around speaking and telling people my story of resilience.
Wow.
And going from there, and then developing my own process to help people and organizations implement resilient strategies within the way that they function and operate. So when we talk about going from the pitfall of grief to the pinnacle of greatness and process, and being able to turn it into prosperity, all of that was part of the journey, but I never would have done it had I not gone through what I went through. And the beauty of it is that even though I know my role and my job and my function was important as an engineer in helping people accomplish what was needed there's a different level of fulfillment that comes when I know that my story and my method of being able to help people get past the grief, get past the setbacks, get past the pain that's holding them back from reaching their fullest potential in life is actually helping them achieve greatness and move forward in so many ways. And that never would have happened had I not had to go through what I had to endure.
Wow, that's so profound. Now, what you just said has given me even a deeper dive into a concept that I have come, in cognizance of over the past few months and years, and it's the concept of the life cycle of creativity. Because there are four important stages in the life cycle of creativity, and just listening to your story, I can see that you've gone through all of them. Now, I'm going to just walk through these stages as I lead on to my next question. The first stage is pre-creation, that before creation. The second stage is creation. And then the third stage is post-creation. And then the fourth stage is recreation. I know typically the average definition of recreation is to have fun and just relax. But in the context of the life cycle of creativity, there's the process of recreation, and even God went through that phase. He went through pre-creation when the Holy Ghost hovered over the face of the sea, diagnosing the problem and seeing that there was darkness upon the face of the deep. There was creation when God began to create with his words and with his hands. There was post-creation when God would look and see that what he had created was good. And then there was recreation where God would, remake and reform and reshape what he had created, whether it was, turning the dust into a carcass where he would breathe life into for man to take form out of, right? So I can go on and on and on, but I said all of that to say this. You basically reinvented yourself. You basically picked up the pieces of your life and remolded it and recreated yourself to become who you are today. And that is phenomenal. You see, many people think that creativity only plays into the mix when you're trying to invent a spaceship and land it on Mars. Yeah. But from just listening to you speak, I've come to see that creativity is applicable and practicable even in your own personal transformation to being who you're called to be and to walking in purpose and to recreating in purpose. So do you want to help someone listening out there who is going through a phase right now that may require him to pick up the pieces of his life? It may just be having to transition into a new industry. It may be having to throw to the trash all that he has read and learned about in school, all the certifications and doctorate degrees he or she has acquired. Just drop that, put that aside, and move on to something new, something higher, reinvent themselves. But they are going through that struggle and they're not sure what waiting for them on the other side. And I want you to speak to that, because you were in a spot in your life where you had planned out your life, you had planned out your perfect vacation, and somehow you were forced into a new paradigm, into a new phase, and you took the bull by the horn, and here we are today. So do you want to say a thing or two to people in that category that I just described?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, and that's part of what led me to looking into becoming a life coach, when establishing how I can help others who are at this place where they need to make a transition, or that they need to tap into those skills and strengths that are within them, or whatever that purpose is calling them. First off, I think that there is a certain level of self-awareness that we need to have. And we know if we're happy with what we're doing or not. That shows, we feel it, and it can exude, it can find itself showing up in different areas of our life. And, there are many people who are doing something because of similar state that I was in, and not necessarily similar state, but they're doing it because they think it's what they're supposed to be doing, and not what they're called or driven to do. And so what I do with my coaching programs is I help people, one, do that level of self-assessment and understand where they are today. Because going back to your life cycle process, sometimes we have to know where we are. We have to know where our baseline is before we can actually go into that pre-creation or that creation process. So we need to be able to, like I said, ground where we are today and what we happen to have. What are those skills? What are those interests? What are those passions that we have that we really wake up out the bed wanting to do, but we may not be doing? And this doesn't necessarily have to involve somebody who's gone through traumatic loss, such as I did, because there are so many people who are, just the normal, just wear and tear and things that we encounter in our life can cause us to be in a rut, to where we're paralyzed, to where we're stagnant. And we know that there's so much more. So getting a full assessment of where we are currently is part of what I help provide. And then the next piece comes into, okay, now that you have identified sort of where you are, where do you want to go? And what are the strategic steps and actions needed to best position you to do what you want to do for your joy and happiness in your life? And this touches not only in our careers and our jobs, but also the ways that we provide support in the world, the ways that we are philanthropic, the ways that we volunteer. It's the ways that we deal with our relationships. In some ways, it's the ways that we handle our own health, our mortality. So being intentional about those things, developing those skills and developing the right consistency, the right habits, and the right actions to be able to propel ourselves is critical and key if we want to find that level of prosperity that comes along with having a life of happiness, regardless of what we've dealt with before.
Thank you. Now, I have another quick question that I'd like to chip in, and it's about, being able to use your story to attract people in the marketplace. And from your history and from your results and experience, you have a track record of being able to use your story in such a great and phenomenal way to attract people. So how can anyone turn their story into a magnet that magnets the right people to them, magnet the right clients to them, magnet the right circumstances to them, magnet the right opportunities to them, so that they can move from where they are to where they need to be, instead of sitting in the pitfalls of pain or wallowing in the valley of grief and shame?
Yeah, I think that very good question, Dafi. I think that, so I love talking about story because, I know I have a very unique, powerful, shocking story. But the reality
Mm.
of it is that we all have unique elements to our life. And there is a
Wow.
story in so many different things that we encounter and do, irregardless of if it was as eye-catching or traumatic as what I went through. If you can identify
Mm.
where you have that uniqueness, and then you can also identify how to make it relatable to whoever your
Mm.
audience is, then that's the
Mm.
secret right there. If you can find that uniqueness that makes you separate from everybody else out there in this world or everybody else in this market, then you are putting yourself in a position to stand out in a positive way. And then if you can go back to making articulating how it is relatable and relevant and using certain aspects of it to connect with whoever is in the marketplace. And depending on what industry you're in, you may have to shift that. It's a little bit different for whatever that target audience is. And then that's the third part too, identifying who benefits most from what you provide.
Mm.
I talk to a lot of speakers and a lot of people about, you don't want to speak to everybody because you're much better suited knowing who is the group that is really going to want your message the most. And you can tailor different things to different audiences, different groups, but
Mm.
it goes a lot. There's more profitability in knowing where your niche is and focusing on that initially than spending a lot of time trying to throw a lot of darts at a moving board. If your dartboard is where you know it is, and you're just focused on that to start out, that's going to get you the best results, the best outcomes, and the most profitability. And then once you do that, then it's easier to branch out because you start to become a thought leader. You become known. You become
Mm.
recognized for this expertise, and then you have the social proof, the backing, the receipts to say, okay, you came and you delivered and you inspired our group with this message, or you were able to teach them something that we haven't been able to communicate in a certain amount, over the course of the years and time within a certain group or organization. So focusing on that level of uniqueness, understanding how to make it relatable, and then understanding how to find where your people are, where your audience is. I think all of those are aspects that you can use your story to be able to position you and to separate you from others in the marketplace.
Wow, that is phenomenal. I have a lot more to ask you, but I'm going to keep our conversation short for today. And I'm going to
Okay.
bring you back on. And I'm going to give a spoiler alert to our listeners. The next time Tyron will come on the show, and this is the first time Tyron will be hearing this too, but I just received like a nudging that I should bring him back so that we can talk about how to monetize your
Yeah.
message. We're going to unpack that. No, we're going to talk about how to monetize your mind and your message. And maybe between now and when he comes back, I may sprinkle or twist something into that. But just spoiler alert to you, our listeners, because I believe you're already hooked into this conversation, and you may be wondering, oh no, don't stop now. We want to go on, right? Because I know that Tyron has such a great way of articulating his ideas and his concepts that has you hooked. But in the interest of time, we're going to keep today's conversation short, and I'm going to bring him back at some point in the future or in the process of time. So this is where we draw the curtain. I want to say thank you so much, Tyron. If you have any final words to say, because I did halt the conversation, abruptly. If you have any final words to say before we call it for today, please take the stage.
Hey, for anybody who wants to learn more, not just about my story, but what I do, how I do what I do by helping those going through trauma, tragedy, and transition make their transformation to be triumphant. Or if you want to understand more about how to leverage that story and use it to create a multi, I want to say a multi six-figure business in speaking and getting out there to the world, come to rebornresilient.com. You'll learn more about me, my platform, and you'll see more about how I do help those that I do help out in the world. Also, you can find me on all the social medias under Tiran Jackson or Tiran Jackson Official. And so you can reach out to me if this is of interest to you, or if you just want to learn more. I'd love to connect with those who are driven by story and want to use their message to impact others out there.
Wow, that is phenomenal. And all those links that Tiran just mentioned, I'll do well to put them in the show notes, so you can also check the show notes so that you don't miss any bit, you don't miss any letter, you don't miss anything in those links, and you get to the right space, you get to the right website when you're ready. Thank you once again, Tiran, for coming. Thank you to you, our listeners on the other side. Thank you for all the wonderful support you've given to this podcast over the years, and or rather over the months. And thank you for dropping all the wonderful comments, sending all the wonderful emails, and also sharing this podcast to help us spread the word. It will interest you to know that at this moment, the last time I checked, this podcast has a very strong followership in 96 countries, and that's just on Spotify and Apple Podcast and other audio platforms. When we consider YouTube and other video platforms, the number, is more than that. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to you, our audience. Keep up the support and keep spreading the word so that we can help people out there ignite their creativity and go from idea to increased income and from concept to cash flow. On this note, I'll call it a day. Thank you for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, have a good one and bye-bye.